My hands shook as I gripped the edge of the table, my legs useless beneath me, crumpled like paper. The room was dark, the air thick with the smell of old wood and fear. My brother, Tom, stood over me, his shadow swallowing the dim light from the lantern. His eyes were cold, like the winter wind that howled outside our little house. He had just done the unthinkable. Our mother lay still on the floor, her face pale, her chest no longer rising. Blood stained the rug, a dark pool spreading like a terrible secret. Tom's hands were red, his breath heavy, and he turned to me, his voice low and cruel. "You say a word, Lily, and you're next," he hissed. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even cry. My legs, already weak from his years of cruelty, gave up entirely that night. I was only 16, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. How did it come to this? How did my own brother become a monster? And what would he do to me now? Let me take you back to the beginning, to a time when things were simpler, when I still believed in love and safety. It was 1872, in a small village nestled in the hills of Virginia. Our house was a creaky wooden place, with a porch that sagged like an old man's shoulders. I was 9 years old, full of dreams and giggles, running through the fields with my older brother, Tom, who was 14. Back then, he was my hero. He'd chase me through the tall grass, pretending to be a bear, making me laugh until my sides hurt. Our mother, Sarah, would watch us from the porch, her smile as warm as the summer sun. She'd call us in for supper, her hands dusted with flour from baking bread. Life felt perfect, like a storybook where nothing bad could ever happen. But even then, there were shadows. Tom had a temper, quick as a spark in dry grass. He'd get mad when I beat him at checkers or when Mother paid me too much attention. "You're her favorite," he'd mutter, his eyes narrowing. I didn't understand it then. I thought he was just being a grumpy big brother. Mother would smooth things over, singing soft hymns while she braided my hair, telling me Tom just needed time to grow up. I believed her. I always believed her. She was the glue that held our little family together, especially after Father died in a mining accident when I was 5. It was just the 3 of us, and Mother worked hard, sewing clothes for neighbors and tending our small garden to keep us fed. One day, when I was 10, I saw the first real sign of trouble. It was a chilly autumn afternoon, and I was helping Mother hang laundry on the line. Tom was supposed to be chopping wood, but he'd been gone for hours. When he finally stumbled home, his breath smelled sour, like the whiskey the men drank at the tavern. Mother's face went tight, her lips a thin line. "Where've you been, Tom?" she asked, her voice sharp but calm. He laughed, a mean sound, and shoved past her, knocking a basket of clothes to the ground. "None of your business, woman," he snapped. Froze, my heart thudding. Tom had never spoken to her like that before. Mother's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say another word. She just picked up the clothes and kept working. I wanted to run to her to hug her, but something in Tom's glare kept me rooted to the spot. That was the first low, the first crack in our happy little world. Things got worse slowly, like a storm creeping over the hills. Tom started disappearing more, coming home late with that same sour smell. He'd yell at Mother for small things, like supper being cold or the fire not burning bright enough. I'd hide in my room, clutching my rag doll, listening to their voices through the thin walls. Mother never yelled back. She'd try to calm him, her voice soft and pleading. "Tom, you're better than this," she'd say. But he wasn't. I could see it in his eyes, like something dark was growing inside him, something I didn't understand. By the time I was 12, Tom was 16, and he'd changed completely. He wasn't my hero anymore. He was taller now, broad-shouldered, and he used his size to scare me. He'd grab my arm too hard when I didn't move fast enough, or he'd knock my plate off the table if I talked too much at supper. "You're useless, Lily," he'd say, his voice cold. Mother tried to protect me, stepping between us when he got angry. But that only made him madder. One night, he threw a chair across the room, shattering a window. The sound of breaking glass echoed in my ears for days. Mother sent him to stay with our uncle in the next town, hoping he'd cool off. But when he came back a month later, he was worse. He didn't just yell anymore. He started hitting. The first time he hurt me was a low moment, one I'll never forget. I was 13, and I'd spilled a bucket of water while cleaning the floor. It was an accident, but Tom grabbed me by the hair and shoved me against the wall. "Can't you do anything right?" he shouted. Pain shot through my head and I cried out. Mother ran in, pulling him away, but he pushed her too, hard enough that she stumbled. That night I lay in bed, my scalp throbbing, wondering why my brother hated me so much. I didn't know then that it wasn't about me. It was about something broken inside him, something that would only get worse. Life became a game of tiptoeing around Tom. Mother and I tried to keep things calm to avoid setting him off. We'd eat supper quietly, clean the house perfectly, and speak in whispers when he was around. But it was like trying to hold back a flood with your hands. Tom's anger grew, and so did his cruelty. He'd lock me in the cellar for hours, laughing as I banged on the door, begging to be let out. Mother would sneak me out when he wasn't looking, her hands shaking as she held me close. "We'll be okay, Lily," she'd whisper. "We'll find a way." But I could see the fear in her eyes, and it scared me more than anything. By the time I was 15, my legs started to weaken. The doctor said it was from stress, from living in constant fear. I'd stumble sometimes, my knees buckling under me. Tom noticed and used it against me. "Look at you, can't even walk right," he'd sneer, pushing me to the ground when Mother wasn't around. Each fall bruised my body and my heart. I started to believe I was useless, just like he said. Mother tried to keep my spirits up, telling me stories of strong women who overcame hard times. "You're stronger than you know, Lily," she'd say. I wanted to believe her, but it was hard when every day felt like a battle I was losing. The highs and lows of our life kept coming, each one pulling us deeper into Tom's darkness. There were moments of hope, like when Mother taught me to sew, her hands guiding mine as we made a quilt together. Those quiet afternoons felt like a shield against the storm. But then Tom would come home, drunk and angry, and the peace would shatter. One night when I was 16, he came home worse than ever. His eyes were wild, his fists clenched. Mother tried to calm him, but he wouldn't listen. He grabbed her arm, twisting it until she cried out. I screamed for him to stop, but he turned on me, shoving me so hard I fell, my legs crumpling beneath me. That was the night my legs stopped working for good, and then came the highest peak, the moment that broke everything. It was a cold winter night, the wind howling outside. Mother and I were in the kitchen, trying to stay quiet while Tom raged about something I couldn't even understand. He'd been drinking all day, his words slurred and mean. Mother stood up to him, her voice firm for the first time in years. "Enough, Tom," she said. "You can't keep doing this." His face twisted, and before I could move, he grabbed a heavy iron pan from the stove. I screamed as he swung it, the sound of it hitting Mother's head echoing like a gunshot. She fell, blood pooling beneath her, and I knew she was gone. Tom turned to me, his eyes empty of anything human. "You say a word, Lily, and you're next," he said, dropping the pan. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My legs wouldn't move, and my heart felt like it would burst. Tom dragged Mother's body to the cellar, leaving me alone in the kitchen, the blood-stained rug the only proof of what he'd done. I sat there, trembling, as the lantern flickered. What would happen to me now? Would Tom come for me next? And how could I escape when I couldn't even walk? That night something worse happened. As I sat in the dark, frozen with fear, I heard footsteps coming up from the cellar. Tom was back, and he wasn't alone. He'd brought a man from the tavern, someone I'd never seen before. The man's eyes were as cold as Tom's, and he carried a rope in his hands. "She won't talk," Tom said, pointing at me. "But we need to make sure." My heart stopped as they stepped closer, the rope swinging like a snake ready to strike. The rope dangled in the stranger's hands, its rough fibers glinting in the lantern's weak glow. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. Tom stood behind the man, his face a mask of shadows. His eyes locked on me like I was nothing more than a problem to be solved. I couldn't move, my legs useless beneath me, My body slumped against the kitchen table. The stranger, a tall man with a scruffy beard and a scar across his cheek, sneered as he stepped closer. "This the girl?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. Tom nodded, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "She won't talk," he said again, but his words felt like a lie. I wanted to scream, to beg, to crawl away, but fear glued me to the spot. What were they going to do to me? Was this the end? Let's go back a little, to the days after that horrible night, when I was still trying to make sense of the nightmare my life had become. Mother was gone, her body hidden in the cellar, and Tom acted like nothing had happened. He cleaned the blood from the rug, whistling a tune as if he'd just spilled a glass of water. I stayed in my room most days, my legs too weak to carry me far, my mind spinning with fear and grief. I kept seeing Mother's face, her warm smile, her gentle hands, and then the awful image of her lying still on the floor. I wanted to cry, but tears wouldn't come. It was like my heart had turned to stone. Tom didn't let me out of his sight for long. He'd check on me, bringing me bread or thin soup, but his kindness was a trap. "You're my sister, Lily," he'd say, his voice soft but sharp, like a knife wrapped in cloth. "You'll stay quiet, won't you?" I nodded, too scared to speak. I knew what he was capable of now. The brother I'd once loved, who'd chased me through fields and carved me little wooden dolls, was gone. In his place was a monster, and I was his prisoner. Life settled into a grim routine, a low point that dragged on like a gray winter day. I spent hours staring out my window, watching the world go on without me. The village was close enough that I could hear the clatter of wagons and the laughter of children playing, but it felt like another world. I was trapped in our creaky house, my legs betraying me, my spirit breaking a little more each day. Tom went about his business, working odd jobs at the tavern or the mill, acting like the perfect son to anyone who asked about Mother. "She's visiting family," he'd lie, his voice smooth as butter. No one questioned him. Why would they? He was charming when he wanted to be, and I was just the sickly sister who never left the house. But there were moments, small highs, that kept me going. One day, I found an old book of Mother's tucked under my bed. It was a collection of fairy tales, the pages worn from her reading them to me when I was little. I'd trace her handwriting in the margins, where she'd written notes like, "Lily loves this one," or "Read this when she's sad." Those words were like a hug from her, a reminder that she'd loved me, that she'd believed in me. I'd read the stories in secret, whispering the words to myself, imagining I was the brave princess who could slay dragons. It was a tiny spark of hope, but it was enough to keep me from giving up. Tom's cruelty didn't stop though. He'd taunt me, knowing I couldn't fight back. One afternoon, he dumped a bucket of cold water over my head while I was trying to sew. "You're useless, Lily," he laughed as I shivered, my dress clinging to my skin. "Can't even dodge a bucket." I bit my lip, holding back tears. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was the useless one for hurting his own family, but I was too afraid. Instead, I focused on the quilt I was making, stitching tiny flowers into the fabric, pretending each one was a step toward freedom. The village started to whisper about us. I'd hear snippets when Tom left the window open. Neighbors wondering why Mother hadn't come back, why I was never seen outside. Mrs. Carter, the kind old widow who lived down the road, came by once, knocking on our door with a basket of apples. "Is your mother home, Tom?" she asked, her voice sweet but curious. Tom smiled, smooth as ever. "She's still with family, ma'am. Lily's not feeling well, but I'm taking care of her." Mrs. Carter nodded, but I saw the doubt in her eyes as she glanced toward my window. I wanted to call out, to tell her the truth, but Tom's shadow loomed behind her, and I stayed silent. That was a low moment, knowing help was so close but out of reach. Weeks turned into months, and I felt like a ghost in my own home. My legs grew weaker, the doctor's warnings about stress ringing in my ears. I'd drag myself from my bed to the kitchen, using the walls for support, but every step was a battle. Tom didn't help. He'd watch me struggle, smirking, sometimes pushing me just to see me fall. "You're a burden, Lily," he'd say. "If it wasn't for me, you'd be dead." I hated him, but I hated myself more for believing him, for thinking maybe I deserved this. Then came a moment that felt like a crack of light in the darkness. One night, when Tom was out at the tavern, I found a loose floorboard in my room. Beneath it was a small tin box, one I'd never seen before. Inside were Mother's things: a locket with a tiny picture of me as a baby, a few coins, and a letter. The letter was addressed to me, written in Mother's neat handwriting. "My dearest Lily," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone and I'm so sorry. You are strong, stronger than you know. Don't let Tom break you. Find a way out. I love you always." Tears fell as I read it, the first I'd cried since that awful night. Mother had known Tom was dangerous. She'd left me away to keep fighting. I hid the box, clutching the locket like a lifeline. It gave me courage, a tiny flame in my chest that refused to go out. I started planning, dreaming of escape. I'd watch Tom, learning his routines, when he went to the tavern, when he slept off his drinking. I'd practice moving, dragging myself across the floor, building strength in my arms. It was slow, painful work, but it was something. I wasn't useless. I wasn't a burden. I was Lily, and I was going to survive. But Tom was always watching, always waiting for me to slip up. One evening, as I was inching my way to the kitchen, I dropped a spoon, and it clattered to the floor. Tom was home, and he heard it. He stormed in, his face red with rage. "What are you doing, sneaking around?" he shouted, grabbing my arm. I tried to pull away, but he was too strong. He dragged me to the cellar door and opened it, the dark stairs yawning like a monster's mouth. "You need to learn your place," he said, his voice cold as ice. Before I could scream, he pushed me, and I tumbled down the stairs, my body hitting each step with a sickening thud. Pain exploded in my head, my arms, my useless legs. I landed at the bottom, the cold dirt floor beneath me, the smell of damp earth and something worse. Mother's body, filling my nose. I lay there, gasping, stars dancing in my vision. Tom stood at the top of the stairs, his silhouette framed by the lantern light. "Stay down there, Lily," he said, slamming the door shut. The lock clicked, and I was alone in the dark, my body bruised, my heart racing. But that wasn't the worst of it. As I lay there, trying to breathe through the pain, I heard a noise, a low, scraping sound like something moving in the shadows. My blood ran cold. Was it a rat? A ghost? Or something far worse? The scraping sound grew louder, a slow, deliberate drag across the cellar floor. My heart thumped so hard I thought it would break my ribs. The darkness was suffocating, pressing against me like a heavy blanket. I couldn't see anything, just the faint outline of crates and barrels in the dim light that leaked through the floorboards above. My body ached from the fall down the stairs, bruises blooming on my arms and back, my useless legs twisted beneath me. The smell of damp earth and decay filled my nose, a cruel reminder of Mother's body, hidden somewhere in this awful place. Was it her? Was her spirit restless, stirring in the shadows? Or was it something else? Something alive and dangerous? I held my breath, straining to listen, my hands clawing at the dirt for anything to protect myself. The sound stopped, and for a moment there was only silence. Then, a low chuckle echoed from the corner of the cellar, cold and familiar. It was Tom. He'd been down here all along, toying with me, letting my fear build. "Thought you could sneak around, didn't you, Lily?" he said, stepping into the faint light, his boots crunching on the dirt. He held a knife, its blade glinting like a snake's eye. I screamed, but no one would hear me down here. What was he going to do? Would this be the end of me, trapped in the dark with my mother's body and my brother's hate? Let's go back a bit, to the days after Tom locked me in the cellar for the first time. It wasn't the night I just told you about, but a few weeks earlier, when his cruelty started to tighten like a noose. I was still 16, still grappling with the loss of Mother and the betrayal of my legs. The cellar had become Tom's favorite punishment. If I dropped a cup or spoke out of turn, he'd drag me to the door and shove me down those stairs. "Think about what you've done," he'd say, locking the door behind me. The cellar was cold and damp, with cobwebs that clung to my skin and a smell that made my stomach turn. I'd sit there for hours, sometimes a whole day, until he decided to let me out. Those were the low moments when I felt like I was disappearing, like the world had forgotten me. But even in those dark times, there were small highs that kept me fighting. One day, while stuck in the cellar, I found an old nail, rusted but sharp, hidden in the dirt. It wasn't much, but it felt like a treasure. I hid it in my pocket, thinking maybe I could use it to pick the lock or defend myself if Tom got too close. It was a tiny piece of power, something he didn't know I had. I'd hold it at night, whispering to myself, "You're not useless, Lily. You're strong." Mother's letter, still hidden under the floorboard in my room, echoed in my mind. She'd believed in me, and I wasn't going to let her down. Life above ground wasn't much better. Tom had started bringing strangers to the house, rough men from the tavern who smelled of whiskey and trouble. They'd sit around the kitchen table, laughing and drinking, while I stayed in my room, pretending to be asleep. I'd hear their voices through the walls, low and secretive, talking about things I didn't understand. Money, plans, names of people I didn't know. Once, I peeked through a crack in the door and saw one of them hand Tom a small sack that clinked like coins. "This better work," the man said, his voice hard. Tom nodded, his face serious. "It will," he said. "She won't be a problem." I didn't know who she was, but a chill ran through me. Was it me? Or someone else? The village rumors grew louder. Mrs. Carter came by again, this time with a plate of cornbread, her eyes searching the windows as if looking for me. "Lily's not well," Tom told her, same as always. But Mrs. Carter didn't leave right away. She lingered, asking about Mother, about when she'd be back. Tom's smile was tight, and I saw his hand twitch, like he wanted to push her out the door. I wanted to shout, to tell her everything, but my voice wouldn't come. Fear had a way of stealing my words. After she left, Tom stormed into my room, his face red. "You been talking to anyone?" he demanded, grabbing my arm. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "Good," he said, letting go. "Keep it that way." Those low moments piled up, each one heavier than the last. My legs were worse now, barely able to hold me even when I used the walls for support. The doctor hadn't come in months. Tom wouldn't let him near the house. I felt like a bird with broken wings, trapped in a cage I couldn't see. But I kept practicing, dragging myself across the floor when Tom was out, building strength in my arms. I'd imagine escaping, running to Mrs. Carter's house, telling her everything. I'd clutch Mother's locket, hidden under my dress, and whisper her words. Find a way out. It was hard to believe in freedom, but I held on to that hope like a lifeline. One day, a small high came unexpectedly. I was in the kitchen, trying to peel potatoes with shaking hands, when I heard a soft tap at the window. It was Emily, a girl from the village who used to play with me when we were younger. She was 12 now, her freckled face pressed against the glass, her eyes wide with worry. "Lily, you okay?" she whispered. I froze, glancing at the door to make sure Tom wasn't home. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice barely audible. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her face. "I'll come back," she said, then darted away before Tom could catch her. My heart lifted for the first time in weeks. Someone knew I was here. Someone cared. But Tom was always one step ahead. He started locking the windows, checking the doors, making sure I couldn't signal anyone. He'd watch me like a hawk, his eyes narrowing if I so much as looked outside. "You're mine to take care of, Lily," he'd say, his voice sweet but poisonous. "No one else needs to know our business." I nodded, keeping my face blank, but inside I was screaming. I started hiding things, small things like a spoon or a piece of string, anything I could use to help me escape. I'd practice moving faster, dragging myself to the door, testing how far I could go before my arms gave out. It was slow, painful work, but it was progress. The tension in the house grew thicker, like a storm about to break. Tom was jumpier now, always looking over his shoulder, muttering to himself when he thought I couldn't hear. I caught words like sheriff and trouble, and my stomach twisted. Was someone on to him? Did someone suspect what he'd done to Mother? I didn't dare hope, but the thought kept me awake at night, planning, dreaming of a way out. Then came the night in the cellar, the one I started with. Tom's knife gleamed as he stepped closer, the stranger with the rope right behind him. I scrambled back, my hands scraping the dirt, searching for anything to defend myself. My fingers closed around the rusted nail I'd hidden in my pocket. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. "Tom, please," I begged, my voice shaking. "I'm your sister." He laughed, that cold, empty sound that made my skin crawl. "You're a liability, Lily," he said. The stranger tightened the rope, his scar twisting as he grinned. I gripped the nail, my heart racing, knowing I had only seconds to act. But then, a new sound broke through the darkness. A loud bang from upstairs, like someone pounding on the front door. Tom froze, his eyes darting to the cellar door. "Who's that?" the stranger hissed, his grip on the rope loosening. The banging grew louder, and a voice called out, sharp and urgent. "Tom, open this door. It's the sheriff." My breath caught. The sheriff. Had someone finally come for me? Tom cursed under his breath, shoving the knife into his belt. "Stay here," he snapped at the stranger, then ran up the stairs, slamming the cellar door behind him. The stranger hesitated, looking at me, then at the door. I clutched the nail tighter, my heart pounding. This was my chance, but the stranger was still here, and he was coming closer. The stranger's boots crunched on the cellar floor as he stepped closer, the rope still dangling in his hands. My fingers tightened around the rusted nail, its sharp point digging into my palm. The banging from upstairs echoed through the house, the sheriff's voice sharp and demanding. "Tom, open this door now." My heart raced with a mix of hope and terror. Was help really here, or would this stranger finish what Tom started before anyone could reach me? The man's scarred face twisted into a scowl, his eyes flicking between me and the cellar door. "You scream, you're dead," he whispered, his voice like gravel. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak, but my mind was screaming. I had to act, had to use this moment, or I'd never get another chance. The nail was my only weapon, and the sheriff's voice was my only hope. But the stranger was closing in, and I could see the glint of a knife tucked into his belt. What would he do if Tom didn't come back? And what was Tom telling the sheriff upstairs? The air felt thick, like I was drowning in it, and I knew this moment could decide whether I lived or died. Let's go back a little, to the weeks before that terrifying night in the cellar. After Tom's first cellar punishment, I was more determined than ever to find a way out. The memory of Mother's letter and her locket kept me going, like a candle in a storm. I was 16, trapped in a body that wouldn't work and a house that felt like a prison, but I wasn't giving up. The low moments were heavy, though. Tom's cruelty had become a daily ritual. He'd mock my useless legs, tipping over my chair when I tried to eat or locking me in my room for hours if I so much as looked at him wrong. "You're lucky I keep you alive," he'd say, his voice cold as winter. I'd bite my lip and stay quiet, but inside I was burning with anger. I wasn't lucky. I was trapped. There were small highs that gave me strength. One day, while Tom was out, I managed to drag myself to the kitchen window and catch a glimpse of Emily, the girl who'd tapped on the glass weeks before. She was playing in the field nearby, her red hair bouncing as she ran. I waved, my heart pounding, and she waved back, her face lighting up. She didn't come closer. Tom had scared her off before, but that wave was like a promise. Someone out there still saw me. I started leaving signs for her. Small things Tom wouldn't notice. A scrap of cloth tied to the window latch, a pebble arranged in the shape of an L on the porch. I didn't know if she understood, but it felt like I was reaching out, like I wasn't completely alone. Tom's behavior grew stranger. He was paranoid, always checking the locks, peering out the windows like he expected trouble. The men from the tavern came by more often, their voices hushed and urgent. I'd listen through the walls, catching bits of their talk, words like gold and hide and nobody can know. I didn't understand it all, but I knew Tom was in deep with something dangerous. One night, I saw him bury a small sack in the backyard, his shovel glinting in the moonlight. He kept looking over his shoulder like he thought someone was watching. I wondered if it was the same sack I'd seen him take from the stranger, the one that clinked like coins. What was he hiding? And how did it connect to Mother's death? The village was buzzing with suspicion now. Mrs. Carter came by again, this time with the preacher, Mr. Hayes. They stood on the porch, their voices low but firm. "We haven't seen Sarah in months, Tom," Mr. Hayes said. "Folks are worried." Tom's charm was slipping. I could hear the edge in his voice as he lied. "She's with her sister in Richmond. Lily's sick like always. I'm handling it." I was in my room, my heart pounding, wanting to scream the truth. But Tom's footsteps were heavy as he came back inside, and I heard him mutter, "Nosy old fools." That night, he locked my door and nailed the window shut. The low moments were piling up, each one making the house feel smaller, the walls closing in, but I kept fighting in my own quiet way. I practiced moving every day, dragging myself across the floor, my arms growing stronger even as my legs stayed weak. I'd hide the nail and other small tools, a broken spoon, a piece of wire, in a crack in the wall. I'd read Mother's fairy tales when Tom was out, letting the stories fuel my courage. In one, a girl outsmarted a giant by being clever, not strong. I told myself I could be like her. I started scratching marks into the floor under my bed, counting the days since Mother's death. It was my way of holding on, of proving I was still here, still alive. One afternoon, a high came that felt like a gift. I was in the kitchen, struggling to reach a jar of preserves, when I heard a soft knock at the back door. It was Emily again, her face pale but determined. "Lily, I know something's wrong," she whispered through the crack. "I told my pa about you." My heart leapt. Her father, Mr. Thompson, was a blacksmith. A big man with a kind heart. If he knew, maybe he'd tell someone who could help. "Don't tell Tom," I begged. She nodded, then slipped away as Tom's boots crunched on the path outside. I hid under the table, my breath shallow, but Tom didn't suspect anything. For the first time I felt like escape was possible. But Tom's grip tightened. He stopped leaving the house as much, like he sensed something was wrong. He'd watch me constantly, his eyes sharp and suspicious. One night, he caught me trying to open the kitchen window. I'd managed to pry it up an inch, hoping to signal Emily, when he grabbed my arm and yanked me back. "What do you think you're doing?" he roared, his face inches from mine. I stammered, trying to lie, but he slapped me hard, sending me sprawling to the floor. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and dangerous. He dragged me to my room and locked me in, nailing the door shut this time. I lay there, my cheeks stinging, my hope flickering like a dying candle. The days blurred together, each one a low point that tested my will. I'd hear Tom and his tavern friends late at night, their voices growing louder, angrier. I caught more words: sheriff, gold, get rid of her. My stomach churned. Were they talking about me? I clutched Mother's locket, praying for strength, for a miracle. And then one night it came. I was in my room, scratching another mark into the floor, when I heard a commotion outside. Horses, voices, the clatter of boots. I dragged myself to the window, peering through a crack in the boards. Lanterns bobbed in the dark, and I saw the sheriff's badge glinting. My heart soared. Someone had listened. Someone had come. But that brought me back to the cellar, to the stranger with the rope and Tom's knife gleaming in the dark. The sheriff's banging upstairs was my only hope, but the stranger was still here. His eyes locked on me. I gripped the nail, my hand shaking. "Stay back," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He laughed, stepping closer, the rope tightening in his hands. "You're not going anywhere, girl," he said. I raised the nail, ready to fight, when the cellar door burst open. Light flooded in, and I saw the sheriff's silhouette, his gun drawn. "Drop it," he shouted at the stranger. The man froze, the rope falling to the floor. Tom was behind the sheriff, his face pale, his hands raised. "Lily, you okay?" the sheriff called. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. But before I could feel safe, the stranger lunged, his knife flashing as he grabbed me, pulling me against him. "Nobody moves or she's dead," he snarled. Saw the sheriff's silhouette at the top of the stairs, his voice booming. "Tom, what's going on down there?" The stranger froze, his eyes darting to the door, the rope slipping slightly in his grip. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear anything else. This was it, my chance to scream, to tell the truth, to end this nightmare. But the stranger lunged toward me, his hand clamping over my mouth before I could make a sound. His breath was hot and sour, his fingers digging into my face. "One word and you're done," he hissed. I struggled, the nail still clutched in my hand, but my arms were pinned under his weight. Upstairs I heard Tom's voice, smooth and lying as always. "Just checking on my sister, Sheriff. She's not well, you know." The sheriff's boots creaked on the floorboards, and I prayed he'd come down, that he'd see me, that he'd know. But the stranger's knife was now at my throat, the cold metal pressing against my skin. One wrong move and I'd be gone, just like Mother. Would the sheriff find me in time, or would Tom's lies win again? Let's step back a bit, to the days leading up to this moment, when hope and fear were tangled like thorns in my heart. After Emily's visit, I clung to the idea that her father might tell someone, that help was coming. But Tom was smarter than I'd hoped. He started keeping the house locked tighter than ever, nailing every window shut and checking the doors twice a day. The low moments were crushing. I'd lie in my room, my legs useless, my body bruised from Tom's punishments, wondering if I'd ever get out. The house felt like a tomb, the air heavy with the secret of Mother's death. I'd dream of her at night, her gentle voice telling me to be strong, but when I woke, the darkness was still there, and so was Tom. There were small highs that kept me going, though. One morning while Tom was out, I found a crack in the wall near my bed, just big enough to hide Mother's locket and the nail. I added a few more things, a bent fork, a piece of string, anything that might help me escape. It wasn't much, but it felt like a rebellion, like I was stealing back a piece of myself. I'd whisper to Mother's locket, pretending she could hear me. "I'm trying, Mama," I'd say. "I'm going to make you proud." Those moments gave me courage, even when Tom's shadow loomed over everything. His tavern friends were coming by almost every night now, their voices low and secretive. I'd listen through the walls, catching more about their plans. They talked about a job they'd done, something about gold stolen from a stagecoach that passed through the hills. Tom was in deep, and I realized Mother's death might have been tied to it. Had she found out? Had she threatened to tell? The thought made my stomach twist, but it also made me angry. Tom hadn't just taken her from me. He'd taken her because she was brave, because she wouldn't stay quiet. I wanted to be like her, but fear kept me silent. The village was stirring, though. I heard it in the snippets of talk that drifted through the windows. People questioning Tom's story, wondering why no one had seen Mother or me. Mrs. Carter and Mr. Hayes came by again, this time with Emily's father, Mr. Thompson. Their voices were firm, not so easily brushed off. "We need to see Lily, Tom," Mr. Thompson said, his deep voice carrying through the door. Tom's charm held, but I could hear the strain in his voice. "She's sleeping, sir. Can't disturb her." I was in my room, my hands pressed against the wall, desperate to make a sound. But Tom was right there, his eyes boring into me when he came back inside. "You try anything, Lily," he whispered, "and you'll wish you hadn't." I nodded, my throat tight, but I was starting to hate him more than I feared him. I kept working on my escape plan, slow and careful. I'd drag myself to the door at night, testing the lock with the nail, trying to figure out how it worked. My arms were stronger now from all the crawling, but my legs were worse, dragging behind me like dead weight. The doctor's words echoed in my head. Stress was eating away at me, stealing my strength. But I didn't care. I'd get out, even if I had to crawl the whole way to Mrs. Carter's house. I started leaving more signs for Emily. A scrap of paper with a single word, "Help," slipped under the door when Tom wasn't looking. I didn't know if she'd find it, but it was something. One day, a high moment came like a burst of sunlight. I was in the kitchen, struggling to reach a cup, when I heard a soft whistle outside. It was Emily, hiding behind the woodpile, her eyes bright with determination. "Lily," she whispered, "my pa's talking to the sheriff. They're coming for you." My heart leapt, but before I could answer, Tom's boots thudded on the porch. Emily vanished, and I slid under the table, my breath shallow. Tom didn't notice, but he was on edge, pacing the house, muttering about trouble and fixing it. I knew he meant me. That night, he locked me in the cellar again, his face dark with anger. "You're staying down there until I figure this out," he said, slamming the door. I clutched the nail, my only weapon, and waited in the dark. The days in the cellar were the lowest of lows. The cold seeped into my bones, and the smell of decay made me gag. I tried to move to keep my blood flowing, but my body was weak, my spirit fraying. I'd talked to Mother in my head, telling her I was sorry that I'd failed her. But then I'd remember her letter, her words. "You are strong, stronger than you know." I'd grip the nail and force myself to keep going, to stay awake, to listen for any chance to escape. One night I heard Tom and his friend, the man with the scar, arguing upstairs. "The sheriff's sniffing around," the stranger said. "We need to deal with the girl." Tom's voice was low, but I heard the fear in it. "I'll handle it," he said. My blood ran cold. I knew what "handle it" meant. That brings us back to the cellar, to the stranger with a rope and the sheriff at the door. The stranger's knife was at my throat, his hand over my mouth, but the sheriff's voice was like a lifeline. I could hear Tom upstairs, his lies smooth but strained. "Just a family matter, Sheriff," he said. "Lily's sick, needs her rest." The sheriff wasn't buying it. "I want to see her, Tom. Now." The stranger cursed under his breath, his grip loosening just enough for me to move. I drove the nail into his hand, hard as I could. He yelped, dropping the knife, and I screamed, loud and desperate. "Sheriff! I'm down here." The stranger lunged for me, but the cellar door flew open, and boots thundered down the stairs. The sheriff burst in, his lantern blinding, his gun drawn. "Step back," he shouted. The stranger froze, hands raised, but Tom was right behind, his face pale with rage, and then chaos erupted. Tom lunged at the sheriff, a knife flashing in his hand. The stranger grabbed me, yanking me back, but I fought, clawing at him with the nail. A shot rang out, deafening in the small space, and someone screamed. I fell to the ground, my vision blurring, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. Was it Tom? The stranger? Or had the sheriff missed, and I was next? The lantern swung wildly, shadows dancing on the walls, and I saw a figure slump to the floor, blood pooling in the dirt. The cellar was a blur of shadows and chaos, the air thick with the sharp sting of gunpowder. My ears rang from the gunshot, my heart hammering as I lay on the cold dirt floor, the rusted nail still clutched in my trembling hand. The lantern swung wildly in the sheriff's grip, casting jagged light across the scene. The stranger with the scar lay crumpled in the corner, blood seeping from his chest, his eyes wide and unseeing. Tom stood frozen, his knife glinting in his hand, his face a mask of shock and fury. The sheriff, a tall man with a weathered face and steady eyes, kept his gun trained on Tom. "Drop it, boy," he growled, his voice like thunder. I scrambled back, my useless legs dragging, my breath coming in gasps. Had the sheriff saved me? Or was Tom's rage about to explode, taking us all with it? I could feel the weight of the moment, the thin line between life and death, and I wondered if this was the end, or the beginning of something even worse. Hey, folks watching this story unfold, I want to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below, give this story a like, and don't forget to subscribe and share. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss the next chapter of my journey. It's only getting wilder. Now, let's go back a bit to the days before this heart-stopping moment, when I was still clinging to hope in a house that felt like a cage. The weeks after Emily's whispered promise about the sheriff were a mix of fear and fragile hope. I was 16, trapped in a body that wouldn't obey me, my legs weaker than ever from Tom's cruelty and the constant dread that hung over our home. The low moments were relentless. Tom had become a shadow, always watching, always waiting for me to slip up. He'd stopped pretending to be the charming brother to the village, his lies growing thinner as the rumors grew louder. I'd hear him pacing at night, muttering about the sheriff, about the gold, about fixing things. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart jump, wondering if he was coming for me, if this was the night he'd decide I was too much trouble. But there were highs, small sparks that kept my spirit alive. One day, while Tom was out, I managed to drag myself to the back door and wedge it open just enough to slip another note outside. "Help me, Sheriff." I scratched onto a scrap of cloth with a charred stick. I didn't know if Emily or her father would find it, but it was like shouting into the void, hoping someone would hear. I'd hide under the table when Tom came back, my heart pounding, but he never noticed the tiny signs I left. A pebble moved, a cloth out of place. Those secret acts felt like defiance, like I was clawing back a piece of myself from Tom's grip. The village was closing in on Tom, and I could feel it. Mrs. Carter and Mr. Thompson came by again, this time with another neighbor, old Mr. Jenkins, who owned the general store. Their voices were sharp, not so easily brushed off. "We're worried about Lily," Mrs. Carter said, her tone firm. "And Sarah's been gone too long, Tom. It ain't right." Tom's voice was smooth, but I heard the crack in it. "She's fine, just visiting family. Lily's sick, like I said." I was in my room, my ear pressed to the wall, my hands shaking. I wanted to bang on the door, to scream, but Tom's boots were already stomping toward me. He burst in, his eyes wild. "You been talking to them?" he hissed, grabbing my arm so hard I winced. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. He let go, but his glare stayed, promising worse if I tried anything. Those low moments crushed me, making me feel like a mouse in a trap. My legs were worse now, barely twitching when I tried to move them. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever walk again, if I'd ever be free. But Mother's locket, hidden in the crack in the wall, was my anchor. I'd hold it at night, tracing the tiny picture of myself as a baby, remembering her words. "Don't let Tom break you." I'd whisper them back, a promise to her and to myself. I wasn't broken yet, even if it felt like I was close. One afternoon, a high came that felt like a miracle. I was in the kitchen, struggling to peel carrots, when I heard a soft tap at the window. It was Emily again, her face pale but fierce. "Lily, the sheriff's coming tonight," she whispered. "My pa told him everything, about you, about Tom, about your mama." My heart leapt, but fear followed fast. "Don't let Tom see you," I begged. She nodded and vanished, quick as a shadow. I hid under the table, my mind racing. The sheriff was coming. Help was close. But Tom was still here, and he was dangerous. I clutched the nail, my only weapon, and prayed I'd be ready when the time came. Tom's paranoia grew worse. He stopped going to the tavern, staying home to watch me like a hawk. He checked the locks, the windows, even the floorboards, like he knew I was hiding something. One night, he caught me dragging myself toward the door, the nail in my hand. His face went dark, and he yanked me up by my hair. "What's this?" he snarled, snatching the nail. I tried to lie, but he slapped me, sending me sprawling. "You're more trouble than you're worth," he said, his voice cold as ice. He dragged me to the cellar and threw me down the stairs, the pain exploding in my body as I hit the dirt. "Stay there," he said, locking the door. I lay in the dark, bruised and shaking, but the thought of the sheriff kept me going. I wouldn't give up. The days in the cellar were a blur of cold and fear. I'd hear Tom and his scarred friend upstairs, their voices low and urgent. "The sheriff's asking questions," the stranger said one night. "We need to move the gold and deal with her." Tom's voice was sharp. I said I'd handle it. I shivered, knowing handle it meant something awful. I kept the bent fork and piece of string hidden in my sleeve, my last scraps of hope. I'd practice moving in the dark, dragging myself across the dirt, ignoring the pain in my body. I had to be ready, had to believe the sheriff would come before Tom made good on his threats. That brings us back to the cellar, to the gunshot and the stranger's body on the floor. The sheriff's gun was still aimed at Tom, who stood rigid, his knife trembling in his hand. "Drop it, Tom," the sheriff said again, his voice steady but hard. Tom's eyes flicked to me, then to the sheriff, and I saw the calculation in his gaze. He wasn't going to surrender. Not Tom. He'd rather fight, rather kill, than face what he'd done. I tried to crawl away, my hands scrabbling in the dirt, but my body was slow, too slow. The sheriff stepped closer, his lantern casting long shadows. "Lily, you okay?" he called, his voice softer now. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "He killed Mama," I choked out. "He hurt me." Tom's face twisted with rage. "She's lying," he shouted, and then he moved, fast as a snake, lunging at the sheriff with his knife. I screamed, my voice raw, as the two men collided, the lantern crashing to the floor. The cellar plunged into darkness, the only sounds grunts and the clatter of metal. I clutched the bent fork, my heart pounding, unable to see who was winning. Was the sheriff down? Was Tom coming for me next? The darkness swallowed everything, and then a new sound cut through, a heavy thud like a body hitting the ground. My breath stopped. Who was it? The cellar was pitch black, the air thick with the smell of blood and dirt. My heart pounded as I lay on the cold floor, the bent fork clutched in my trembling hand. The thud of a body hitting the ground echoed in my ears, followed by a terrible silence. Was it Tom? The sheriff? I couldn't see, couldn't move fast enough to escape. My useless legs dragged behind me as I clawed at the dirt, trying to pull myself toward the stairs. A groan broke the silence, low and pained, and then a match flared, casting a weak glow. The sheriff stood, blood dripping from a cut on his arm, his gun still in hand. Tom lay sprawled at his feet, his knife a few inches away, his chest heaving but his eyes closed. The sheriff's face was grim as he looked at me. "It's over, Lily," he said, his voice rough but kind. "You're safe now." But as he stepped toward me, a shadow moved behind him. Tom's hand twitched, reaching for the knife. My scream caught in my throat. Was Tom still a threat? Would he get up and finish what he started, or was this finally the end of my nightmare? Let's go back a bit to the days before that heart-stopping moment in the cellar. The news of the sheriff's interest had given me a flicker of hope, but it also made Tom more dangerous. I was 16, trapped in a house that felt like a grave, my body weakened by fear and Tom's cruelty. The low moments were suffocating. Tom barely left the house now, his eyes always on me, his temper flaring at the smallest things. If I dropped a spoon or took too long to answer him, he'd grab my arm, his fingers leaving bruises. "You're nothing but trouble," he'd snarl, shoving me into my room or the cellar. I'd lie there, my body aching, my mind racing with fear. The smell of the cellar, that awful mix of damp earth and decay, clung to me even when I was upstairs. I knew Mother's body was down there, hidden in the shadows, and it broke my heart every time I thought of her. But there were highs, small victories that kept me fighting. One night, while Tom was asleep, I managed to drag myself to the kitchen and find a loose nail in the floorboard. It was sharper than the one Tom had taken, and I hid it in my sleeve, next to the bent fork and string. These tiny tools were my secret, my way of saying I wasn't done yet. I'd whisper to Mother's locket, tucked safely in the crack in my wall, promising her I'd get out. I'd practice moving when Tom was out, dragging myself across the floor, my arms burning but growing stronger. I imagined running to Mrs. Carter's house, telling her everything, seeing Tom locked away. It was a dream that kept me alive, even when the days felt endless. The village was on edge now. I could hear it in the voices that drifted through the windows, neighbors talking about Tom, about Mother, about me. "Something's not right at that house," I heard Mr. Jenkins say one day as he passed by with Mrs. Carter. "Lily hasn't been seen in months." Their words were like a lifeline, but they also made Tom jumpier. He'd pace the house, muttering about the sheriff, about nosy fools who needed to mind their own business. One night, I heard him arguing with the scarred man again, their voices low and angry. "The gold's safe," Tom said. "But the girl's a problem." The stranger's voice was cold. Then get rid of her. I shivered, clutching my hidden nail. Knowing my time was running out, a small high came one afternoon when I heard a familiar whistle outside. It was Emily, hiding behind the woodpile again. She didn't come close, Tom was home, but she tossed a tiny stone at the window, and when I peeked out, I saw her make a fist like she was saying, "Be strong." I nodded, my heart swelling. Emily was still out there, still trying to help. I scratched another note on a scrap of cloth, "Sheriff Cellar," and pushed it through a crack in the window frame. I didn't know if she'd find it, but it felt like planting a seed, hoping it would grow into something that could save me. Tom's cruelty grew worse though. He stopped pretending to care, his charm replaced by a raw, ugly anger. One day, he caught me dragging myself toward the door, the nail slipping from my sleeve. His eyes narrowed and he grabbed it, twisting my arm until I cried out. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. He dragged me to the cellar again, throwing me down the stairs. The pain was blinding, my body slamming into the dirt, but I didn't cry. I wouldn't give him that. He locked the door, leaving me in the dark, and I heard him laugh. "You'll learn, Lily," he said. But I was learning how to hate him, how to fight back in my own way. The cellar became my world, a low point that tested every ounce of my strength. I'd lie in the dark, the cold seeping into my bones, the smell of decay making my stomach churn. I'd talk to Mother in my head, telling her I was sorry, asking her to help me. I'd hold the bent fork, imagining it as a sword, like in the fairy tales she used to read me. I'd move, inch by inch, exploring the cellar with my hands, searching for anything that could help. One day, I found a loose brick in the wall, just big enough to hide my tools. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a secret Tom didn't know. The tension in the house was like a storm about to break. Tom's meetings with the scarred man grew more frequent, their voices sharp with panic. "The sheriff's getting close," the stranger said one night. "We need to move the gold now." Tom cursed, his voice shaking. "Not until she's dealt with." I knew he meant me. I clutched my hidden tools, my heart racing, planning my next move. I'd try the lock again, or maybe signal Emily if I could get to a window. I didn't know how, but I had to keep trying. That brings us back to the cellar, to the sheriff standing over Tom's crumpled form, the stranger dead in the corner. Tom's hand twitched toward the knife, and I tried to scream to warn the sheriff, but my voice was a croak. The sheriff saw it, though, kicking the knife away before Tom could grab it. "Don't move," he said, his gun steady. Tom groaned, his eyes fluttering open, filled with hate. The sheriff tied his hands with rope, his movements quick and sure. "Lily, you're coming with me," he said, kneeling beside me. His face was kind, but I could see the worry in his eyes. "We need to get you out of here." But as he helped me up, a new sound cut through the cellar, a sharp crack like wood splintering. The sheriff froze, his head turning toward the stairs. Footsteps, heavy and fast, echoed from above. "Sheriff!" a voice called, urgent but unfamiliar. Was it help, or one of Tom's tavern friends, come to finish what he started? The sheriff pushed me behind a crate, his gun raised. "Stay down," he whispered. The footsteps grew louder, and a shadow appeared at the top of the stairs, a figure holding something that glinted in the dark. The shadow at the top of the cellar stairs loomed large, the glint of metal in their hand sending a chill through me. My breath caught, my body pressed against the rough crate as the sheriff crouched beside me. His gun steady but his eyes sharp with tension. Tom lay tied up on the floor, groaning, his face twisted with pain and rage. The stranger's body was still in the corner, a grim reminder of how close I'd come to death. The footsteps thudded closer, and the sheriff's grip tightened on his gun. "Who's there?" he barked, his voice echoing in the dark. No answer came, only the creak of the stairs as the figure descended. My heart pounded, the bent fork still clutched in my hand, useless against whatever was coming. Was this one of Tom's tavern friends, here to finish his work? Or was it help, someone to pull me out of this nightmare? The lantern's weak light flickered, and I saw a face emerge from the shadows. Mr. Thompson, Emily's father, holding a shovel. His eyes wide with fear but fierce with determination. "Sheriff, it's me," he said, his voice shaking. "We heard the shot." Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. Tom's eyes snapped open, and he thrashed against the ropes, his voice a snarl. "You'll all pay for this," he shouted. The air felt electric, like a storm about to break. Would Tom find a way to escape, even now? And what would happen when the truth about Mother came out? Let's go back a bit, to the days before this moment, when I was still trapped in Tom's web, clinging to the hope that the sheriff would come. I was 16, my body weak but my spirit stubborn, fueled by Mother's locket and the tiny tools I'd hidden. My bent fork, my piece of string, my secret defiance. The low moments were heavy, like carrying a bucket of stones. Tom's cruelty had no limits now. He'd stopped pretending to be my brother, treating me like a prisoner instead. He'd lock me in the cellar for days at a time, tossing me scraps of bread like I was a dog. "You're lucky I don't just end you," he'd say, his voice cold as the winter wind. I'd lie in the dark, the smell of decay wrapping around me, my heart aching for Mother. I knew her body was down there, hidden behind crates or under the dirt, and it made my skin crawl. But I wouldn't let Tom win. I'd whisper to myself, "You're strong, Lily," echoing Mother's words, and I'd keep moving, keep planning. There were small highs that lit up the darkness. One night, while Tom was out, I managed to drag myself to the cellar's loose brick and add another tool, a jagged piece of glass I'd found in the dirt. It wasn't much, but it felt like a sword in my hand, something to fight back with. I'd practice with it, imagining I was the brave girl from Mother's fairy tales, the one who outsmarted the monster. I'd also started marking the wall, scratching tiny lines to count the days, to prove I was still here. Each mark was a victory, a way to say, "I'm not gone yet." I'd hold Mother's locket, hidden in my sleeve now, and feel her strength in me. She'd told me to find a way out, and I was trying, even if it felt impossible. The village was buzzing louder than ever. I could hear it through the cracks in the walls, neighbors talking, their voices sharp with worry. "Sarah's been gone too long," I heard Mrs. Carter say one day as she passed by with Mr. Jenkins. "And Lily, nobody's seen her. It ain't right." Their words were like a warm hand on my shoulder, but they also made Tom more dangerous. He'd stopped going to the tavern, staying home to watch me, his eyes like a hawk's. One afternoon, he caught me trying to pry open the cellar door with a piece of glass. His face went red, and he grabbed me by the hair, yanking me back. "You think you can outsmart me?" he roared, throwing me against the wall. Pain shot through my shoulder, but I didn't cry. I stared at him, my hate stronger than my fear. "You won't win," I whispered, so quiet he barely heard. His eyes narrowed, and he locked me in the cellar again, the door slamming like a judge's gavel. But hope kept creeping in, like sunlight through a crack. Emily was still out there, leaving signs of her own. One day, I found a tiny flower tucked under the windowsill, its petals crushed but bright. It was her way of saying she hadn't forgotten me. I hid it in my sleeve, next to the locket, and it gave me strength. I started listening harder, catching bits of Tom's conversations with the scarred man. They were planning something big, moving the gold, they said, before the sheriff could find it. "The girl's the problem," the stranger said one night, his voice low. "She knows too much." Tom's reply was cold. "I'll take care of her." I shivered, knowing he meant it, but I also knew the sheriff was close. Emily had said so, and I believed her. The low moments kept coming, though. My body was failing me more each day, my legs like dead weight, my arms trembling from the effort of dragging myself around. The cellar was my prison, its cold walls closing in, the smell of decay a constant reminder of Mother's fate. I'd lie there at night, my heart heavy, wondering if I'd ever see the sky again. But I'd force myself to move, to keep my blood flowing, to keep my mind sharp. I'd talk to Mother in my head, telling her I was trying, that I'd make her proud. I'd imagine her voice, soft and warm, saying, "You're stronger than you know, Lily." It was enough to keep me going, even when I felt like breaking point. One evening, a high came that felt like a gift. I was in the cellar, scratching another mark on the wall, when I heard a soft tap above. It was Emily, her voice barely a whisper through the floorboards. "Lily, the sheriff's coming tomorrow," she said. "My pa's with him." My heart leapt, but fear followed fast. Tomorrow was so far away, and Tom was so close. I whispered back, "Be careful," but she was already gone. I clutched the piece of glass, my mind racing. I had to be ready, had to find a way to help the sheriff when he came. I practiced moving faster, dragging myself to the stairs, testing my strength. It hurt, but pain was nothing compared to the hope burning in my chest. That brings us back to the cellar, to Mr. Thompson's shovel glinting in the lantern light, the sheriff standing over Tom's tied-up form. Tom's threat, "You'll all pay for this," hung in the air, but the sheriff didn't flinch. He helped me up, his hands gentle but strong. "You're safe now, Lily," he said again, but Tom's thrashing made me doubt it. Mr. Thompson stepped forward, his shovel raised, ready to help if Tom tried anything. The sheriff hauled Tom to his feet, ignoring his curses. "You're coming with me," he said, pushing him toward the stairs. Mr. Thompson knelt beside me, his face kind but worried. "We're getting you out, Lily," he said. "Emily told us everything." But as they started up the stairs, a new sound stopped us cold, a loud crash from outside like glass shattering. The sheriff froze, his gun raised again. "What was that?" Mr. Thompson whispered, his shovel trembling in his hands. Tom laughed, a low, ugly sound. "You think this is over," he said, his eyes glinting with malice. The sheriff shoved him forward, but the crash came again, closer now, followed by the sound of boots crunching on the porch. Someone else was here, someone who wasn't on our side. Hey folks, are you enjoying this story? I hope it's keeping you on the edge of your seat. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Are you in Virginia like me or somewhere far away? Give this story a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. It's only getting more intense. Now let's see what happens next. The crash of glass echoed through the house, a sharp, splintering sound that made my heart lurch. The sheriff's grip on Tom tightened, his gun raised toward the cellar stairs where the noise had come from. Mr. Thompson stood frozen, his shovel trembling in his hands, his eyes darting to the shadows above. Tom's laugh was low and cruel, his tied hands twitching as if he knew something we didn't. "You're too late," he sneered, his voice dripping with malice. The sheriff shoved him against the wall, but the sound of boots crunching on broken glass grew louder, closer, coming from the kitchen above. My breath caught, my fingers tightening around the jagged piece of glass I'd hidden in my sleeve. The lantern flickered, casting wild shadows, and I felt the weight of the moment, like a trap snapping shut. Was it another of Tom's tavern friends, come to free him? Or worse, someone here to silence us all? The sheriff's eyes met mine, steady but urgent. "Stay low, Lily," he whispered. Mr. Thompson stepped in front of me, his shovel raised like a shield. The footsteps stopped, and a voice called down, rough and unfamiliar. "Tom, you down there?" My stomach twisted. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Let's go back a bit, to the days before this terrifying moment, when I was still clinging to the hope that the sheriff's arrival would save me. I was 16, my body broken but my will stubborn, fueled by Mother's locket and the tiny tools I'd hidden. My piece of glass, my bent fork, my scrap of string. The low moments were like drowning in mud. Tom's cruelty had stripped away any pretense of family. He'd lock me in the cellar for days, leaving me with nothing but a crust of bread and a bucket of water. The cold seeped into my bones, and the smell of decay, Mother's body hidden somewhere in the dark, made my stomach churn. I'd lie there, my useless legs sprawled, my arms aching from dragging myself around, wondering if I'd ever see daylight again. Tom's voice would echo through the door, taunting me. "Nobody's coming for you, Lily," he'd say. "You're mine to deal with." I'd bite my lip, holding back tears, refusing to let him see me break. But there were highs, small sparks that kept me fighting. One night in the cellar I found a crack in the wall near the loose brick, just wide enough to hide a new treasure. A small, rusty key I'd found in the dirt. I didn't know what it opened, but it felt like a gift from Mother, a sign to keep going. I'd hold it at night, along with her locket, whispering, "I'm trying, Mama." I'd practice moving, dragging myself across the floor, my arms stronger now despite the pain. I'd imagine escaping, running to Mrs. Carter's house, telling the world what Tom had done. It was a dream, but it was enough to keep my heart beating. The village was restless, the rumors louder than ever. I'd hear snippets through the walls, neighbors talking about Tom, about Mother's absence, about me. "That boy's hiding something," I heard Mr. Jenkins say one day as he passed by with the preacher, Mr. Hayes. "Lily's not right, locked up in that house." Their words were like a rope thrown to a drowning girl, but Tom was always there, cutting it before I could grab hold. He'd stopped leaving the house for long, his eyes always on me, his temper flaring at nothing. One afternoon, he caught me scratching a mark on the cellar wall, counting the days. He grabbed my arm, twisting it until I gasped. "You think you're clever," he snarled, throwing me against a crate. The pain was sharp, but I didn't cry. I stared at him, my hate burning brighter than my fear. "You won't keep me here forever," I whispered. His face darkened, and he locked me in again, the door slamming like a coffin lid. A small high came one morning when I heard Emily's whistle outside. I was in the cellar, but the sound came through a crack in the floorboards. I couldn't see her, but I knew it was her, keeping her promise. I scratched a message in the dirt, "Sheriff, help," and pushed a pebble through the crack, hoping she'd see it. I didn't know if it worked, but it felt like a shout into the dark, a way to say I was still here. I kept practicing with my tools, testing the rusty key on the cellar lock when Tom was asleep. It didn't fit, but I didn't give up. I'd find a use for it, or I'd find another way. Mother's words echoed in my head. Find a way out. I wasn't going to let her down. Tom's meetings with the scarred man had stopped, but I knew he was planning something. I'd hear him muttering at night, pacing the house, talking about the gold and the sheriff. "They're too close," he'd say, his voice sharp with panic. I didn't know the whole story, but I pieced together enough. The gold was stolen, and Mother had found out. That's why he'd killed her, why he needed me gone. The thought made my blood boil, but it also made me sharper, more determined. I'd watch him, learning his habits, waiting for a chance. I'd move when he was out, testing my strength, hiding my tools, keeping my secrets. One evening, a high came that felt like a miracle. I was in the cellar, my hands raw from dragging myself around, when I heard a commotion outside. Horses, voices, the clatter of boots. I dragged myself to the crack in the floorboards, my heart pounding. It was the sheriff, his badge glinting in the moonlight, with Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Carter behind him. "We're coming, Lily," Mrs. Carter called, her voice soft but strong. Tears stung my eyes. They knew. They were here. But Tom was home, and I heard his voice, smooth and lying, trying to turn them away. I prayed they wouldn't believe him, that they'd find me before it was too late. That brings us back to the cellar, to the sheriff and Mr. Thompson facing the new threat from above. The rough voice called again. "Tom, you there?" And the sheriff motioned for Mr. Thompson to stay quiet. Tom's laugh was a knife in the dark. "Told you it wasn't over," he said, thrashing against his ropes. The sheriff kicked him, hard, and Tom grunted, falling silent. The footsteps above moved closer, and I saw the glint of a gun in the newcomer's hand as he reached the top of the stairs. "Sheriff, I know you're down there," the voice said, cold and sure. "Let Tom go, or we're burning this place down." My heart stopped. Burn the house. With me in it. The sheriff's face was grim, his gun steady, but I could see the sweat on his brow. Mr. Thompson gripped his shovel. His eyes locked on the stairs. I clutched my piece of glass, my mind racing. I couldn't run, couldn't fight, but I wasn't helpless. I had to do something. The newcomer started down the stairs, his boots heavy, his gun gleaming. The sheriff whispered, "Lily, stay down." But I wasn't listening. I threw the piece of glass, hard as I could, at the man's legs. It hit, and he stumbled, cursing, his gun clattering down the stairs. The sheriff lunged, tackling him, and the cellar erupted into chaos again. Grunts, shouts, the thud of fists, but then a new sound cut through, a sharp crackle like fire catching. Smoke curled down the stairs, stinging my eyes. The house was burning. Tom laughed again, wild and unhinged. "You're all gonna die with me," he screamed, thrashing against his ropes. The sheriff and the newcomer wrestled in the shadows, Mr. Thompson swinging his shovel. I coughed, the smoke thickening, my vision blurring. Was this how it ended? Trapped in a burning house with my brother's hate. Smoke curled into the cellar, thick and choking, as the crackle of fire grew louder above. My eyes stung, my lungs burned, and I coughed, clutching the bent fork like it could save me from the flames. The sheriff wrestled with the newcomer on the stairs, their grunts mixing with the roar of the fire. Mr. Thompson swung his shovel, landing a blow that sent the man sprawling, his gun skidding across the dirt. Tom thrashed against his ropes, his wild laughter echoing through the chaos. "You'll burn, Lily," he screamed, his eyes gleaming with madness. The sheriff hauled the newcomer up, tying his hands with the same rope that bound Tom. "We're getting out," he shouted, coughing as the smoke thickened. Mr. Thompson scooped me up, his strong arms trembling but steady, and started for the stairs. The heat was unbearable, the fire's glow licking at the cellar door. I clung to him, my heart pounding, wondering if we'd make it out alive or if Tom's hate would trap us all in this inferno. The ceiling groaned, a beam cracking above us, and I screamed as it fell, crashing inches from where we stood. Was this the end, or could we escape the flames and Tom's darkness? Let's go back a bit, to the days before this fiery nightmare, when I was still holding on to hope in a house that felt like a prison. I was 16, my body weakened by Tom's cruelty, my legs useless, but my spirit burning with Mother's words. "You are strong, stronger than you know." The low moments were crushing. Tom had stopped pretending to be human, his anger a constant storm. He'd lock me in the cellar for days, the cold and dark eating away at me, the smell of Mother's hidden body a cruel reminder of what he'd done. I'd lie there, my arms sore from dragging myself around, my heart heavy with grief. "Nobody cares about you, Lily," he'd say through the door, his voice sharp as a blade. I'd clutch the rusty key and Mother's locket, hidden in my sleeve, and whisper back to myself, "I care. I'm enough." But there were highs, tiny victories that kept me alive. One night in the cellar I found a small crack in the wall, just big enough to hide another tool. A broken bottleneck, its edge sharp enough to cut. It joined my collection, the bent fork, the string, the key. These were my weapons, my proof that I wasn't helpless. I'd practice moving, dragging myself across the dirt, my arms stronger despite the pain. I'd imagine facing Tom, telling him he'd never break me. I'd scratch messages into the wall. Lily was here, a way to claim my existence, to say I wouldn't disappear. Mother's locket was my anchor, its tiny picture of me as a baby reminding me of her love. I'd whisper to it, "I'll get out, Mama. I promise." The village was closing in on Tom. I heard it in the voices outside. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Jenkins, the preacher, all demanding answers. "Where's Sarah? Where's Lily?" they asked, their voices sharp with suspicion. Tom's lies were crumbling, his charm no match for their persistence. One day I heard Emily's father, Mr. Thompson, arguing with him on the porch. "We're not leaving until we see her," he said, his voice like thunder. Tom slammed the door, his face red with rage, and turned on me. "You did this, didn't you?" he snarled, grabbing my arm. I shook my head, but he shoved me into the cellar, the door locking with a thud. "You'll stay there until they forget you," he said. But I knew they wouldn't. Emily had told them, and they were coming. Those low moments in the cellar were the darkest yet. The cold was relentless, the smell of decay overwhelming. I'd lie in the dirt, my body aching, my mind spinning with fear. What if the sheriff didn't come in time? What if Tom killed me first? But I'd force myself to move, to keep my blood flowing, to stay sharp. I'd talk to Mother, imagining her beside me, her voice soft and warm. "You're not alone, Lily," she'd say in my mind. I'd hold the broken bottleneck, practicing how I'd use it if Tom came for me. I wasn't strong, but I was clever like the girls in her fairy tales. I'd find a way. A high came one afternoon when I heard a soft tap at the cellar's only window, high up in the wall. It was Emily, her face pressed against the glass, her eyes wide with worry. "Lily, the sheriff's coming tonight," she whispered. "Hold on." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. She slipped a tiny note through the crack, "Be ready," and vanished before Tom could see. I hid the note in my sleeve, my heart soaring. Help was close, closer than ever. I practiced moving faster, dragging myself to the stairs, testing the rusty key on the lock again. It didn't work, but I didn't care. I had the bottleneck, the fork, my will. I was ready. Tom was unraveling. He'd pace the house, muttering about the gold, the sheriff, the problem I'd become. I heard him with the scarred man one night, their voices low and panicked. "They know about the stagecoach," the stranger said. "We need to move the gold and get rid of her." Tom's voice was cold. "I'll handle it." I knew what he meant, and it made my blood run cold. But it also made me angry. He'd taken Mother, taken my legs, taken my freedom. He wouldn't take my life. That brings us back to the burning cellar, the sheriff and Mr. Thompson fighting to get us out. The ceiling groaned again, another beam cracking as the fire roared above. Smoke filled my lungs, and I coughed, clinging to Mr. Thompson as he carried me up the stairs. The sheriff dragged Tom and the newcomer, both tied, their curses drowned by the fire's roar. We burst into the kitchen, the heat like a wall, flames licking at the walls. The front door was ahead, but the fire was spreading fast, the porch already burning. "Keep moving," the sheriff shouted, kicking the door open. We stumbled outside, the cold night air a shock after the heat. I gasped, coughing, as Mr. Thompson set me down on the grass. The house was ablaze, its windows glowing red, the roof creaking as it began to collapse. Tom was still laughing, even as the sheriff tied him to a tree. "You think you've won," he shouted, his eyes wild. "You'll never find the gold." The sheriff ignored him, turning to me. "You're safe, Lily," he said, his voice soft. Mr. Thompson knelt beside me, his face smudged with soot. "Emily's waiting for you," he said. I cried then, tears of relief, of grief, of everything I'd held in. The sheriff searched the cellar later, after the fire died, and found Mother's body, just as I'd feared. Tom's fate was sealed. He'd face justice for her murder, for the gold, for everything. I lived with Mrs. Carter after that, my legs never recovering but my spirit stronger than ever. Emily became my sister, her family my home. I learned to sew, to laugh, to live again. The gold was never found, but I didn't care. I'd found something better. Freedom, and the strength Mother always knew I had. The lesson: never let anyone break you, no matter how dark it gets. You're stronger than you know, just like I was. Tob continued. "No, wait, that's the end. But the story's lesson lives on. Hold on to hope, fight with everything you've got, and never give up." Hey, amazing viewers, that's the end of my story. But I hope it's just the beginning of our journey together. Did you feel the suspense, the fear, the triumph? I'd love to know. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Are you in a cozy living room, a bustling city, or somewhere far away? Give this story a big like, hit that subscribe button and share it with everyone you know. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss more gripping tales like this one. Thank you for joining me, for rooting for Lily, and for being part of this adventure. Keep shining, keep fighting, and I'll see you in the next story.